doing a little research, I looked up the head of the company running the top leagues in this country, who happens to be a woman, Nikki Doucet, was recently quoted saying that women's football has to do more to prove its return on investment. You're constantly having to prove that there's a market for women's sports. So my question, I think, to the panel, I'll just throw it out there, but who most does one have to prove that there's a market for women's sports? Is it, corporates? Is it media? Is it the fans? Who do you have to prove this to?
I'm happy to get started. Thank you so much for being here today. And I know that sports is probably a very different type of subject to the ones that you're all used to. But I think in terms of the business and trying to justify, the investment, the biggest opportunity lies in the consumer. So women's sports has opened the door for the other half of the world for the first time in a really long time, becoming not only a really good investment opportunity, but also representing a gender equality movement that is probably going to be the most powerful one that we experience in our lifetime. And commercially speaking, as a second kind of category of people that we need to convince, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for brands to be able to actually participate in our gender equality movement and literally fuel it. And so I know that we just heard Annie announce our front of jersey at Como, and we have Zoe here sitting in the audience with us, which is huge news for us. But most importantly, because of the way that we came together and really tried to understand that we need to build a sustainable future for these clubs. And financial emancipation is the entire point of what we're doing. And that's actually, if you bring it into the global sphere, it's something that women need. It's the first step to true gender equality, is when we have control of our financial destinies. And so this is, I think, one of the many reasons why we've been able to put together this incredible deal. We now have 2 female-led businesses on our jersey, which is the first time it ever happened in European football, which is great. But at the same time, carving this path towards sustainability and thinking about the sponsorship deals not only being a logo slapped on a jersey. So part of the way that we structured it is that 5% of all advertising revenue from Italian brands on We Are 8 go back into the club. So there you have more opportunities to continue to commercialize, as we do, what we're doing, which is to speak to women for the first time and to build a brand and to build a club and an experience and opportunity that they're really interested in, that they want to participate in, even if they've never been exposed to football, which is, it's part of what we do. So a little bit of a longer answer, but I think it's there's different categories here.
I think you talk about sustainability, and I think that's really key. And I think if we go back till about 2012, female football has been on this great pathway, and we did the first, that first broadcast deal that, was done at the Sky BBC deal, got, at least it got eyeballs onto female sport. And I was sort of praying at that point that the revenue would start to come into the gate receipts. But building the narrative, building the sport has always been, key. And what you've done so well is put, women's sport at the heart. At Newcastle, we were totally different. We had an established men's team, and we didn't have a women's team. They were paying for their own, they were paying to pay. There was no infrastructure. There was nowhere. They had to, go and play at 9 o'clock at night. There were no professional contracts. So we had to convince everybody, you were talking about who do we have to convince? We had to convince, our board that it was the right investment case. We had to convince our broadcasting partners. And I have to say, I think if we want to move, women's sport forward, we must never forget that we are always on show. But the huge opportunity that it's driven over the last, to see the joy of having my women's team be promoted twice successively, the commitment that they've done and put into that, into running the team has just been extraordinary.
So you all have something in common. You're either all on the hunt for investments, which we're going to drill into for each of you, or you're trying to make the numbers work. And Sheila, you went through the purchase in 2005 of the Washington Mystics women's basketball team. At the time you bought it, it was loss-making. I think you paid $10 million initially. 20 years on, what does financial success for that purchase look like?
Well, it just happened. And this is a case where it was an opportunity that was brought to me, and people kept saying to me, do not do this. Do not do it. And I said, look, the WNBA is now the longest running women's professional sports team. And I could see where was passion with so many people coming in to watch the Mystics and the WNBA as a whole. We had a really solid fan base from the very beginning. And I decided that I was going to take this leap of faith and decide to do it. And at the time, I was the only woman that had invested in a professional sports team. Now, when the opportunity was brought to me and I looked at the financials, and I'm like, you know, I'm going to be writing a lot of checks over the years. But I came up with another idea. Abe Pollin, who owned the Washington Capitals, had sold it to Ted Leonsis. Ted then had first right of refusal once Abe passed away to buy the Washington Wizards. So I called Ted at the time that Abe came to me and wanted to know if he wanted to buy the WNBA team. And I said, I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse. And I said, you can get a woman and an African American. And I want to buy into all three teams. And the reason why I did it, because financially, that gave me the foundation to keep that women's team going. So any losses were going to be funneled through the Wizards and the Caps, who I knew were profitable. So by joining them and putting a lot more money into it, I again took a leap of faith. And what you have to understand, it was a passion project, still is. And from 2005 until this year, we've been losing money. And it was a case where, from the very beginning, I had to invest even more money to build locker rooms, to get office space. We had nothing when I bought the team. And it was just a case where I had to be patient. And as I've watched the WNBA grow, and there were steps and missteps in hiring coaches, basketball operations people, this is a very, very hard business. I want you all to know this. You can call it a vanity play, you can call it whatever you want, but it is a business. It was trying to make the numbers work. And back to your question, the reason why the WNBA is now working, we are now, and I'm going to list all the networks we're on, ABC, CBS, ESPN, ESPN2, ION, NBA TV. That media play has now catapulted us from 0 to over 200 million. So now, for the first time, the W is going to start getting a payback. We now have charter flights for the girls. I mean, we're really doing well. And that is important because we have been fighting for this for a long, long time. But look how old we are. We're 28 years old now. It takes that kind of time and patience and love and the passion to really invest in women, and especially in the sports industry.
If I may be so bold, but if you were to sell the Mystics today, what do you think it would go for?
Ooh. I have not crunched those numbers because, you know, Forbes does this valuation, and I wouldn't just sell the Mystics. I would sell out of all of what I have. That's where you make the money.
Amanda, as you explore potential investments in sports, how important would having a women's component be to any part of your investment plan?
Absolutely vital. You know, at the heart, when we looked at Newcastle, you know, before we bought the club, we went up. I knew Becky Langley, who's been incredible at building our women's team up there, and so we knew that we put it at the heart. Today, I think that any rights owner, rights buyer has to put women's sport at the heart of what they do. And the growth, I think there's just so much phenomenal growth in whether it's broadcast revenues. You've identified the huge explosion of NBA rights and WNBA rights. Mm-hmm. And that's you won't have a rights buyer now that will say, well, we're only interested in men's rights. It's just ludicrous, so absolutely.
So if you were going to invest in a women's team, would you run it independently or would you run it together with the men's team?
Well, at the moment we discuss this outside because and you meet someone, oh, that was quite clever, because, what you've done brilliantly is identify women's teams need to be run differently to men's teams. And people think, and unfortunately, there's a huge amount of capital investment that needs to go into all football. So I think getting the right partners is really important. But you've got to have people with real integrity as well. That there has to be commitment to this pathway, and there has to be partners that are prepared to roll up their sleeves and do what you did so brilliantly, which is really invest for the longer term. It is a long-term project, and so I think I like to see them. I've always seen it, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for people in whether it's the Premier League or other leagues that might say, you know what, I don't want to focus on my women's team. I want to put it in the safe custody of someone else. And I think that's a really valuable opportunity for clubs, especially if that other party takes on that custodian role so well and is able to do what you've done.
Yeah, and can I just say, and coordinate, the WNBA has gone through the same thing, because we have been under the umbrella of the NBA. It was run by first in its inception with David Stern, now Adam Silver. And what we have finally done, we now have our own female commissioner who's now solidly in a leadership role where she can now make decisions for us. I'm sure she and Adam talk all the time, but that has really made a difference over these past few years, is the leadership of Kathy Engelbert. She came out of Deloitte. She understands the business model, and it's just been absolutely terrific. And she has been able to single-handedly help us and guide us into a better situation, which I think is now catapulted us to a new level.
It's sorry to interrupt, but it's a completely different stage of the business, right? If we look at it, women's sports is at its infancy. It is not a developed business in any way, shape, or form. There's not predictable revenue streams to it. A lot of the work that we're doing, it's around understanding the product market fit. So I think that when we speak about Mercury and the reasons why we came together as a group and we brought in these investors and these partners is because we identified this opportunity to be able to actually build that path forward, understanding that there was a lot of experimentation that needed to be done. And in that, maybe breaking some rules that men's sports have not done so far, because they've been successful for the last how many years, and they have predictable revenue streams, and they sell out their stadiums, and their media rights are huge. That is not something that happens in women's sports. So when you look at it, again, from a business lens, you have to separate them, and you have to understand how to build that path forward, which is really second mover advantage, which is great, right? It's a great opportunity, because now you're saying, okay, they've done these things right, and obviously it's a huge business around the world, sports generally speaking, but they've also done some things wrong. This is a story I shared with Jackie, but early on in found in Mercury, I was invited to a distressed asset investing gala for the first time in my career. I was like, why am I sitting here? Who are all these people? I don't understand what's going on. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, they might think women's football is a distressed asset. And I'm like, it is actually, when you're looking at the numbers. Unfortunately, because of the way that it's been built, it's actually built all these dependencies with either the men's team or the local government or the federation. So these teams, they basically live on other people's charity. But then I'm sitting and I'm thinking, men's football here in Europe is also a distressed asset. So why are they separating it? And again, it's thinking, okay, one is generating a lot of revenue, but is it really profitable? Not really. And so I think that that's kind of the ethos, that everything that we do when we're investing into a club, we invest revenue opportunities. We invest real ROI, because we have investors ourselves, and we're here for profit, right? And we need to make sure that we're building that path to sustainability. And then we invest in protecting our investment, because unlike the US, there's relegation on this side. Mm-hmm. And if we get relegated, you lose money. So we have to protect the sporting exercise as well. And, it is big checks and constantly writing them. But I think if you take this very thoughtful approach to, okay, if I invest X, I'm going to get Y by doing this, this, and this. And, the commercial operation at Como has been one of those examples. We completely rebranded the club. We made it look like a luxury fashion house. We honored its location, right? We built new social media channels. We built the entire website infrastructure to attract the likes of We Are 8, right? So we could partner with these people and build bigger deals that would value our inventory at higher numbers to continue being able to monetize and build a virtuous loop around this.
So, Victoire, I want to definitely come back to what you're actively looking at after the Como purchase, but I first just want to finish. Amanda, there are a lot of rumors about what you are looking at. Can you give us any color on the stage you're at in terms of your next sports investment?
Sorry. So we're actively in, we're looking at a very serious investment. We've been working very hard. We miss football. I miss Newcastle a huge amount, and and we're in the middle of, doing quite a lot of work around that. I can't say too much because,
the stage you're at.
but what I can say is what we're looking to do is, I'm a huge, I'm just football mad. I'm as much as I do love basketball, as much, as football, basketball is where, and I think that, we've got some of the best football in the Premier League. We're very lucky to have such great clubs, but we should also not be complacent about our league position, because we at the moment attract huge, broadcast rights, and we must make sure that, we continue to really look about attracting the next generation of fans. So whatever club we go to, what we're trying to do is find a club where we can really give the investment that club needs, give that community. We want to be able to invest in the community, in the women's team, in making sure that, that pathway's there, and also looking at where will media rights go to? Will there be a direct consumer model? How are we going to excite, and how are we going to, what are our kids going to look like? My 9-year-old boy, what I love about, women's sport is that my 9-year-old prefers to watch women play football more than men. He knows, he's got forensic knowledge of every female player pretty much all over, and it's extraordinary. And I love to see that these are going to be the next buyers of our jerseys. And I love the fact that my son will buy a women's jersey, will go in and that's where the growth is. Yeah. So.
This clock is ticking really fast. But just very quickly, Victoire, on your list, I know that you're actively looking, one of the countries, England, Spain, France, Germany. What are you sort of actively looking at with respect to this country, to the UK?
You're asking the hard questions that we can't really answer. But yes, I think for us, our model is very focused on the women's game for this same reasons I was mentioning before. And we understand that England is, the leading league on this side of the world, and so we want to have a presence here. But it's about building the right partnership, right? So it is really understanding that when you come into an ownership group, the other side of the table, because you're sharing a brand, they have to see eye to eye in terms of how to actually build this new product that they're bringing to the market in a way. And we have this very concise understanding that the consumer behavior in women's sports looks very different to the one in the men's side. And for the Americans in the room, I think that, you will always hear that football is a religion on this side, and it is. It is very tribal. If you're born into a family that is a Manchester United family, then that's going to be the rest of your life, and that's about it. And the reality is that that's changing. Young kids are now getting their hands on the internet, and they're going to choose their clubs, not because someone told them to choose that. And that's really empowering. I have an 18-month-old baby, and I know for a fact that she'll be a fan of many different clubs because she found the content and because she aligned on that. And you really need to have a clear understanding of it, because then you build the business, not the other way around.
So if we could bring up, I had just one chart that really stood out to me, and I wanted to share that. So this shows you the really massive disparity in the revenues from the top women's football teams versus the top men's teams. So you can see Eniola referred to this in her presentation about the disparities. I just wanted to bring that up and sort of set the stage, because I want to talk about valuations, and maybe Sheila, Amanda, please jump in. But so the highest valuation for a sports team is currently held by Angel City FC. Okay, that's a U.S. women's soccer team. That's after Willow Bay and Bob Iger took a controlling stake that valued the club at $250 million. So my question is, how soon does anyone think it'll take to get to $1 billion women's sports franchise?
Well, also one of the issues though with talking about $1 billion franchise is who's actually going to buy these clubs at $1 billion valuation. And I think you've got to, there's so little liquidity in football, whether it's the men's game, the women's game. And I think what I love about your model is that you've been able to bring new money into football that will allow us to trade our assets. I've been fortunate that we've been able to, come in football. We've come through, I've worked with a number of clubs and been invested in clubs, and it's sometimes very hard to actually get exits. So whilst we talk about the $1 billion valuation, we also need to know that there are people prepared to pay $1 billion price.
Well, yeah, we're looking to the American.
But definitely, I'm sure.
Because, there is this question, and you burst my bubble a little bit last night, because we were talking about how much the U.S. leads in terms of revenue generation for women's sports. And, the same source here, Deloitte's projecting $670 million from the U.S., I think in an estimated $1.24 billion for 2024. Europe follows with $180 million. But as you said to me tonight, the U.S., yes, the numbers are bigger, but it doesn't necessarily translate into, billion-dollar franchises. What can you say about that market?
Well, not yet. Again, it's going to take, I would say, the next 10 to 15 years. The growth is slow. Okay, and I have to say the jury's still out on all of this. I just know that since 2005 to the present, our numbers have tripled. As far as sports, we got both men, women, young women. Now we fill the rafters. We're completely sold out of a 22 to 25,000 seat stadium. And I have to also talk about the NCAA. They have really been the foundation of helping us with this growth. You're going to see it with your younger players. They're the feeder market into your teams. And so I do support the NCAA. I go to their games, we look for players, we draft the players from there. This has been, basketball has been a market that has been around for a long time, so we know how to play the game. And because of now with the media rights deals, our jersey sales are just through the roof. It has just been a remarkable year because of these young players coming out of the NCAA. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have just really turned the tables around. We have to even find larger stadiums now. We're also seeing it with women's volleyball. We call it soccer in the U.S. Yours is football.
Nobody's perfect.
But our soccer teams are just, I will say, kicking it. They're doing great. And so we're just at a point where there's been a whole revolution and explosion of women's sports in the U.S. And we have every corporation now getting behind us. It's been easier to be able to raise money because people want to, we're a winner now.
Be part of it.
So they want to jump on the bandwagon. And this is something that we have to keep going. It's the canary in the coal mine. We have got to be careful to not sit back and rest on our laurels. We have to continue to push forward. I'm concerned now with a new president coming in that the Title IX program doesn't get stymied in any way.
You think that's a possibility?
I don't know, but there's inklings of whispers out there. We've got to really start watching how we're continuing to be supportive. And I think that women have got to really be very conscious of what's happening on the political front, because funds could be taken back through the colleges. There's all sorts of things going around. So we have to be really vigilant and continue to fight as we move forward.
Just very quickly, on what basis would repealing Title IX be in the interest of any new administration?
It's just about women. It's just pulling back on women, on all of our rights.
That's
and I just think we have got to be careful.
Okay.
This is the point around this being a gender equality movement, right? And that why women's sports is growing so fast in this moment in time is because, you know, we are starting to do something men have been doing for so long and owning it and actually transferring, you know, that revenue from one side to another, which is huge. When you look at this is the most unfair thing that you can do. You're comparing 100-year-old businesses to what are very new businesses, and you're saying, it's nowhere there. You know, we're nowhere there. It's still early. That's just, you got to understand if you're comparing apples to apples, and at the moment we're not.
And you got to be very careful in showing these statistics, because then you have corporations looking at this saying, why should I even invest?
Yeah.
We have got to be our own protectors. We have to be champions for our rights. And when I bring up the politics, we have to watch it, whoever's coming into administrations or whoever's running companies. We as women have got to protect ourselves and continue to fight for growth and sustainability.
I'm going to get in trouble here because we're technically out of time, but I'm going to ask to do 1 to 2 word fire rounds because I think they're fun questions. Amanda.
Oh, God.
1 or 2 words.
Sorry.
Describe your deal-making style.
Forensic.
I think you're going to say ferocious.
Ferocious? No,
Okay.
no. I just don't give up. I've changed a lot. I mean, I'm 51 now. When I was 34 when we did Man City, and I've changed a lot. I've learned a lot. So I've softened a little bit.
Victoire, instincts or data? What matters more in deal making? 1 or 2 words.
I'm Latin. That's a really hard thing to ask. Transparency.
Instincts or data?
Yeah, I mean,
both instincts.
No. I think it's being able to understand that there's real transparency on the other side. Otherwise, there's no partnership.
Okay. Sheila, what's the worst deal-making advice you've ever gotten?
Don't do it.